Hey everyone, welcome to the Steering Committee 2025 election retrospective call. Uh, as usual, we are abiding by the CNCF Code of Conduct, so be nice to everybody. Uh, yeah, so most of the agenda, yeah, I see we have more agenda items now, so uh, we can go through the things that went well, and folks, please feel free to like add or like call out stuff if I've missed anything. But we had good diversity in the candidates and also in the candidates who got elected, uh, which is something that was discussed last year, and we have improved in that front. And we also have like 19 exceptions granted. Yeah, those are two things that I liked. Before we move on to the next section, like, does anybody have anything else that they'd like to
Yep.
add?
Um, any patterns in the exceptions?
Mm,
Because 19 exceptions granted is a fair number. So, and one of the things that we've done from year to year is add certain teams to automatically become part of the voter roll because we realize that these are people whose activity doesn't show up necessarily on GitHub, like the SRC, right? Once upon a time, right? So if there's 19, seems like there's got to be at least one team in there somewhere. No?
The the pattern I saw was that um there were contributors who do contribute on meetings, on Zoom meetings. There were also contributors who contributed greatly in the past and since I guess dropped in contributing for the past year or so, but still contribute in some way, either in Slack messages or in Zoom meetings. But their presence is seen and felt.
yeah, speaking of teams, I guess we had a bunch of folks from Contribex who are doing work which is not like necessarily tracked by GitHub, and also from SIG Security, I believe, folks who are like involved in SIG Security were also part of the exceptions.
The only kind of grouping that I can kind of pick out from the list of exceptions that we approved is um, was a little bit surprising to me, but there were a number of folks who had like sigs.yaml roles, but didn't have the on GitHub activity. So like there was a couple tech leads and a chair that didn't end up meeting the GitHub activity bar, but then we're obviously, oh yeah, you are a SIG chair, you are a SIG tech lead. Of course, you are going to get an exception approved.
Yeah, although that does suggest something for steering, which is I'm surprised to hear that a tech lead wouldn't have enough GitHub activity to automatically get included. Uh, like I can see a chair depending on the SIG, right? Because often a chair's duties have more to do with holding meetings than they do necessarily with reviewing and approving stuff. But for a tech
Yeah.
lead, I would expect most of their activity to be reviewing and approving stuff. And if if a tech lead for some standing entity doesn't have to do at least 50 things in a year, you have to wonder whether or not we actually need that particular team anymore.
I think that's a fair comment. I think maybe out of the
Yeah,
scope of our particular retro, but
yeah,
it does strike me as curious as well, Josh. And
yeah.
like to your question of like could we automatically include people, is there somebody that's escaping, like we could possibly do something like, hey, if you're in 6.yaml, then you get an automatic buy into the election because you're in 6.yaml, but that may also paper over the issue. So I don't know that I would strongly Like, while that seems like a pattern that we could pick out, I don't know that I would necessarily advocate for that being a new default policy.
Also, are there really chairs that don't do any reviewing? I thought the opposite was true, that we find it hard to find the opposite of that. Just generally, that's a side topic, but yeah, I was that's surprising to me.
Yeah, well, like, it obviously depends on the SIG and how they've organized themselves. Like, yeah, in theory, the theory behind it would be a chair is somebody that can do. They might talk at KubeCon. They might run the Zoom call. They might do a session where they're like teaching or showing somebody else how to do a thing, or they might be like delegating work or just organizing to making sure that work gets done, but they don't necessarily need to push the button on GitHub themselves. The tech lead one is definitely more surprising from the perspective, like, if you're doing the technical stuff, we organize our technical work on GitHub. So you would expect that there would be at least 50 button pushes in a year, because button push can literally be emoji reaction. So, like, if there isn't 50 button pushes from a particular individual in a year across, like, the SIG themselves, the Kubernetes community repo, like other goings on, that, yeah, it does strike as a little bit odd, but maybe outliers, right?
Yeah, no, I get it. No worries. I guess just yeah, in our SIG, that's not the case, but I can understand that totally depends on each SIG, but totally.
I guess we can move on then. Yeah, Christoph, would you like to talk about your part?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out, thanks to Nina and Sareem. Like, you both stepped up in a big way. I know my activity was very like bursty, where I'd be like, okay, I have an afternoon. I'm going to do a whole bunch of things in this one afternoon because I have a couple hours to do things. But it was spottier than I would have liked, and spottier than my contributions have been in the past years. But you both stepped up in a big way, and I appreciate it.
Yep, we couldn't have done it without your support, obviously.
And also want to put out, we were lucky enough to have a really strong set of candidates this time around. Down to the point where I literally put off my voting until the day before voting closed because I kept looking at it and I couldn't figure out how to rank people. So I think that helped, and it resulted in improving steering diversity in the elected group. So that went well. Oh yeah, and the GitHub banner helped.
Yeah, that clicked in my mind. As I just want to call out as well, of like the banner that we put up on the GitHub Enterprise, that everybody, just when they log into GitHub, anybody who's touching GitHub, because that's obviously the source of like where the activity was, it was a very visible prompt for people to be like, hey, maybe you're not missing your email, maybe you're not following our social channels, maybe you're not following Slack as deeply, but if you're on GitHub, it's a big banner there that you can dismiss, but you have to like read it at least before going and dismissing it. And the last couple of years that we've done that, it's been really good. I think like the action item that maybe want to put in there is like formalizing and documenting that is a thing that we should do. With some like sample text, like I can put into the documentation the sample text that I've used for a couple of years, and formalize that like, it's been easy the last couple of years because I've been an EO, so I can go in and just add it myself. But if we formalize it, it'll be like, oh yeah, we contact the GitHub management team, ask them to put up that banner with a particular expiry date, and just make sure that people get that very visible reminder the next time they open any Kubernetes repo of like, hey, go vote.
Yep, we can probably take an action item to document this in the handbook. All right. Does anybody else have anything more they'd like to add under things that went well? All right. moving on to things that didn't go as planned, we had an issue with the the candidate bio, the character count, and we found out this like too late into the candidate nomination period, and had to do some last minute like fixing. I am not entirely up to speed on all the details. Maybe Christoph can help. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, we felt like we were relying on a script to do this. The script was looking for a negative condition, and the elections folder had moved. So when we reorganized the repo and we moved the elections folder, it was looking for like, hey, bios that are too long. But because it wasn't looking at the proper directory, there was no bios that were too long because that directory didn't exist. The test for this, the actual test script was passing every PR, regardless of what the character count actually was. And we needed to reach out and work with some candidates manually to get things trimmed down and passing and all of that, which we were able to do, but needed to delay election start by a little bit to make sure that we had all the bios in and that it could be fair from that perspective, that every candidate had a bio that complied with the guidelines. I was able to basically do slap some duct tape on the script for this year, but I have a PR open for basically completely revamping the script into something that is written in Golang and much more robust, in order to hopefully prevent this from happening again. But yeah, it's what was one of those like unfortunate things of like, it was literally just, I think, me reading the bios and I'm like, hey, that bio seems really long. That doesn't seem quite right. And then do a word count on it. It's like, oh, that is significantly over the limit. And let's get things trimmed down so that we can ensure that the guidelines were fair for everyone. If somebody was just relying on CI to tell them if the bio was actually within limits or not.
Josh, you're talking on mute.
Does the template mention the character limit? I'll go look.
No, it
That
does
would be another
not.
thing to fix. Yeah, okay, that would
Having
be
just
another
done this, it absolutely does not mention a limit. I, in fact, did not know until another candidate, Mache, actually, DM'd me to warn me that I needed to fix my bio.
Same.
Yeah, I only warned because I run into the same thing. So it was like, ooh.
Okay, create a PR there then.
Can we make sure Christoph's PR that I know is in progress lands now before we get into the next election cycles? Because I know that with all the problems that people will have in between and other things popping up, if we don't merge it now-ish, it'll get lost until next year. And the one thing that I would like to avoid is we're running into the same situation again next year after people submit their bios. Suddenly that we're changing the requirements for the checks.
Yeah, absolutely. Much of that. We put a hold on the Golang rewrite because the Golang rewrite that I did more strictly adheres to the actual written policy. So like the policy for these states that your bio should be 300. The CI, the bash script that we have, I think it checks for 400 or 450 because it's actually calculating in like the YAML front matter of folks, like their names and your social channels and like all of those extra fields. So like there's a little bit of leeway in the bash script because it was a very inexact, like it was just running, WC on the file. Whereas the Golang one basically extracts out just the bio field, and is able to ignore like links like that, like a link counts as, if it's a 2-word link, it's 2 words. It's not 3 words because it's 2 words and then the link itself. So like it's able to do all of that in Golang because it's a bit more intelligent and robust when actually counting the words. But then it caps it at 300, which is the exact written policy. So we didn't want to like that. That was going to be like a shift from what the bash had done in previous years. So we just like put the duct tape on the bash for this year, and then in future years, like now that we're between election cycles, we can get the proper enforcement merged so that when we go into the election period next year, we're already ready to go.
Yeah, and the goal was, the whole goal here is not a particular set of characters, but just to prevent people from having a 5-page resume as their bio, because no one will read it, and that's not good for the election. So.
All right. Do we have any more comments on the bio length? Seems like no. So the next item is we were supposed to host a candidate Q&A session with the existing steering committee, but this never happened at all. And one of the reasons that this did not happen was because the handbook says that this can be organized along with the public steering committee meetings. And in the month of September, when we had the public steering meeting, the candidate nominations were still open. And we were supposed to, actually, I don't exactly remember if this was supposed to happen while the candidate nominations were still open or like right after they're closed. I believe it was once all candidates have like submitted their nominations, we'll have a session with steering, and the handbook also mentions that we can coordinate with steering and have a separate time slot other than the public steering meeting for candidates who are not in the time zone in which the steering meeting is happening. And yeah, we were not able to like host this in October as well, but in October that would have been like the middle of the somewhere in the middle of the voting period. That was also not a good time. We should have done it earlier. So I think we can like right now the handbook just gives like a guideline on how this call can be organized, but we can make a bit more, we can bring a bit more structure around this, or say something like the first steering, like public steering meeting after the nomination period closes can be used. I mean, we can bring more like certainty there, I guess, but this is something we can take help from steering as well, like what steering thinks when we should host this call and so on. Yeah, Christopher.
So my initial thought from both my time running for steering as well as the couple cycles of election officer, I don't know how useful the steering committee Q&A session for candidates is anymore, or truly ever was. I'm happy to, if somebody wants to disagree with that, and that it is still helpful or a thing that we should do in future years, or if people felt that we missed out on not having it this year. I'd love to hear from some of the candidates or newly elected steering members if you have opinions on this, if you felt like you missed out there. But I personally don't know that it necessarily has value still, or that it ended up delivering on the value that we wanted it to have.
As I understand, the purpose of the steering Q&A, which was actually requested by steering some, 4 election cycles ago, was that we had people who were running for steering who didn't have a clear idea what was involved being on steering, and that was the purpose of the Q&A. I think this time This time we had that in easy mode, as in the people who are running are largely people who have been around enough that they actually pretty much know what's involved. But that doesn't mean that'll be true next year. So I guess the question is, is that a problem that we don't have to worry about, or is it something that we do want to put more emphasis on getting on the schedule next year?
I just want to agree with Josh. Is times change, and what was the status quo 4 years ago is not the same as this time. There is less people. The people that is here knows better each other. I mean, we've been together for a long time, right? So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I'm happy with whatever people want to decide if we should do it again or not. I see that it can go one way or the other.
I would also agree with Christoph, because there's a lot of information now out. We have steering blog posts where basically the steering describes what steering is doing. We have the AMA at Contributors Summit / Maintainer Summit. I think the information flow and the awareness of steering and what steering does is more widespread. And I would rather, I think, given also the time and effort for people, I would rather have it on like an on-demand base, that if someone really, really needs some information, that then something like this can be scheduled.
I don't actually think this is an election issue. I think this is an issue of the steering committee needing to work transparently in public more often, and that we should be hosting our own AMA a couple times a year. It shouldn't be tied to the election cycle. The Maintainer Summit AMA is not accessible to all or even most maintainers, and it's certainly not accessible to all contributors, since they aren't all eligible to attend. Like they may have visa issues, they can't go, their employers won't pay them. So like this is a steering issue, I think, not necessarily an election issue. If people don't know what we're doing and how the job works, then I don't necessarily think that we're doing the job well, you know?
Okay, my suggestion here is that we punt this particular thing to steering.
Sorry,
Consider the punt accepted.
Yeah.
Can I? Sorry, I lost my window and I wanted to say something. But we do have periodic steering public meetings, right?
Yeah, but we don't publicize them very well, or as like an AMA type situation. So that is a marketing problem on our part that we should hash out in the next private meeting.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. Is maybe we need to aggregate the public instead of AMA? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, that's I was gonna ask something very similar to what Josh said. Is like, okay, so as far as concrete suggestions, because like this is a component of elections right now. Do we like it sounds like the consensus is we're going to punt it to steering and ask what they would like to do, and just let steering make that decision as far as if this continues to be a part of the election process, if they want it to still be a part of the steering election process, or if it's something that may be removed or replaced with something else.
Yeah, I think we should take over doing a better job of publicizing that the public steering meetings are also there for people to ask us any questions they want, in addition to watching us work in public. And during an active election cycle, Contribex does some additional push for like, hey, go to the public steering meeting to talk to steering to find out what they do, that kind of thing. So it's a co-marketing thing, not a y'all owning the AMA thing.
And for the matter at hand, and that the suggestion tied to the to the election, do we bring this to the next steering meeting? Is the proposal here to decide on the AMA for the next election, Christoph and Josh?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is the consensus is like for the purposes of our retro, we'll be like, we don't know whether this is a valuable component. It obviously did not work this year just from scheduling and timing stuff. If this is a component that we want to keep or not, we're not sure. But I think we're like, as the for the purposes of this retro, the election subproject of Contribex will ask the steering committee what it wants to do and just punt that question over to you all of what you want to do for future elections, and then we will take your input on that. And if there are things that you just want to take on and be like, don't worry about doing any of that, Contribex, great, then we won't. If it's hey, we want to work with you to do something slightly different, like, you know, can you do marketing pushes in these ways to like direct people towards a different meeting, a different session, a different whatever, then that's something that we can look at and take under advisement. But like, yeah, no, that's a reasonable thing we can do, or no, that's not reasonable for these reasons. Like, we can work through it at that point. But it sounds like the election subproject needs to go and be like, hey, steering, this didn't work out. What would you like to do? But we'll formally ask you that question. You don't necessarily need to take that away as an action item from this meeting necessarily, but we will formally ask you of what you all think and get it on your agenda.
I think that's great, and also brings the cat topic and brings the right discussion. So I think that it's a good thing from the retro. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, moving on. The turnout of the number of voters is still the same, like more or less the same as that of the last couple of years. I had the exact numbers here. We have like a total of 653 eligible voters, but only 200 votes were cast. This is more of a question, like what can we do to bring this up? So kind of an open question.
Yeah, and I think that would be a longer brainstorming session. You know, possibly like a couple of months before the election starts in the election subproject. One of the things I actually put in there for ideas for next year is an idea that I've had several times and haven't followed through on, which is actually do an org member drive, because at any given time in Kubernetes, we have quite a few people who are regular contributors who have not applied for org membership. And anybody who is a new org member is a lot more likely to vote because they'll be more excited by it. So that's one thing I think we can do.
Yeah, we had the similar discussion in Contrib-X a couple of, I think, before the election ended. And also I would see that SIG leads are there or should be in a more advertisement role, especially for their meetings, because that's basically where active contributors and maintainers are. And also to encourage people to get exceptions, especially what Josh mentioned, when you have new people who joined the project or who are quite recently made it into maintainer status. And also there was what we discussed with Contrib-X was that every SIG should go through their active contributors and check if they are actually org members or not, and push them towards org membership.
I think there's actually an issue with asking SIG leads or chairs to do the advertising themselves. Many of us are running or are on leadership with people who are running, and that to me looks like an unfair abuse of a position of power, and that instead somebody from Contrib-X should be showing up to SIG meetings to remind people to vote. Throw an item on a SIG's weekly meeting agenda or something. But like, I could not have like the single largest attended meeting for SIG release. are the release team meetings. I'm the sole person in control of the release team subproject. There's no universe in which I could have said in a meeting, hey, remember to go vote, because it would have looked like I'm asking for the entirety of the like 30 people on any given release team to go vote for me. Can't do that, right? And the same goes for SIG docs. Like Natalie couldn't have said in a SIG docs meeting, "Hey, remember to go vote," because she was running. So a neutral party needs to be doing this, which means it needs to be somebody from ContribX or from the election sub project. Maybe one of the election officers should be taking on this job, but like literally just throw an agenda item on SIG meetings.
So I hear what you're saying, Kat. And I understand the sensitivity around not wanting to feel like you're putting, a thumb on the scale and tipping it in any direction. Um, I think generally, like, I think Contribx does, like, putting it on Contribx doesn't necessarily solve the problem from the perspective of like Contribx has the same problem where like Contribx folks run in the election too,
Sure,
as
but
a
it solves it, but the
former
election officers
Contribx person,
can't.
former steering committee person. Like that is a thing that is true. The election officers maybe, but like there's three of us. There's 35 SIGs. That's somewhere around that line. So like that is like as far as like the meetings and stuff that is a big burden. I think some of the membership drive type stuff that we can do off election cycle, so there isn't any tipping of scales because there's nobody running yet. Like if we're looking at a October November kind of election cycle, then like let's do a summer org member drive, and just time it for there of like, hey, we're going to have elections in a few months. Let's have the SIG leads who have the best visibility into who is operating in their SIGs, and whether they get membership. Like I think release does a good job of that anyways, because there's a bunch of like release team roles that require GitHub permissions anyways. But there are some other SIGs that maybe don't have the same like forcing functions there, that if we did like a summer org member drive of like, hey, go through the people who are contributing and nudge them, encourage them to become org members just outside of the election cycle, might solve some of that problem, because then once they're org members, then they see the banner when they go to GitHub, because like that's the other thing is like the people who are eligible to vote will actually see the banner already when they go on GitHub, because that's the other kind of component of the turnout thing that none of this really addresses, is the fact that we have about a third of the people who are org members, or who are eligible, who touch the repo over 50 times a year. A third of them are choosing to vote, 2/3 are not. Even though they touch the repo over 50 times a year and are active, they're still choosing not to vote for some reason.
Wanted a couple comments. One is in terms of sort of conflict of interest reminders. We've actually handled this before through something else that we've done, which is reminders in company cohorts, where folks actually share with their own engineering department that an election is going on, because for any of the vendors, they often have, a substantial number of org members who work for them. And in those cases, the election officers have offered suggested text to keep it neutral, right? Because sometimes somebody from that company is running also. And so to make it neutral rather than making it a company campaign is just remind people that, hey, there's an election going on and you ought to vote. And I think we can do the same for SIGs, right? Which is we send out something to the SIG leads and say, hey, and here's some sample text for an announcement that you would make in your SIG meeting that is neutral.
So
ahead.
Josh, my hand raised is to address your comment, and I have to respectfully disagree with the assumption that those company internal emails are neutral.
Agree, they are not.
They will never be seen as neutral internal to the company in the sense, no matter how it's written, if the person sending the email, for example, has a certain status or respect or job role or anything internal to that company, their opinion on that automatically takes away that neutrality. And I'm not saying that it's a bad that they're not allowed or it's a bad thing that they do those company emails. I mean, that's their own prerogative. They can go ahead and do that. But for us to assume that that's a neutral way for us to pick up how many votes get cast in steering, I think that's unfortunately not the case. And I can tell you, like, for example, internally to Google, Tim Hocken will send an email, he often does, about who he thinks people should vote for in steering, and people take his opinion rather like gospel, and they will follow exactly what he says because of their respect for him, admiration, they're in his line of, org, et cetera, et cetera. And that can likely happen across many companies who actively try and make sure that their person that is involved in the election is getting elected. So I want to say that I don't agree with pushing the company internal email part as part of that.
Okay, so two comments. One, I would like to caution against calling out specific people, specific names in recorded meetings. I have concerns that we might be treading towards code of conduct things there. I just want to caution, tiptoeing up the line. I don't think anybody has said anything that is bad or over a line here, but I want to caution against that without I don't want to make specific accusations. That's a line that I have concerns about.
I completely understand. I want to also say that it wasn't a bad or accusatory thing that I was saying. In fact, I don't disagree with that practice. I'm just saying that as an example of something, and it's definitely not something I disagree with. Anyone can send emails. I'm cool with that generally.
Well, we generally try to discourage folks from electioneering. So, Josh should put a comment in chat, that things were difficult. Yeah, because I guess from my corporate employer's experience, we internally think of this more like we have somebody who is not running, somebody who is I've done it before as emeritus, and there's no recommendations. I think again what Josh is referring to as far as the neutral language, it is more a neutral thing of hey, maybe you're not checking your Kubernetes dev folder in your email. Maybe your Kubernetes dev email is going to your personal email as opposed to your work email. And sometimes something showing up in your Kubernetes engineering team list is more a reminder of hey, the election is running, go vote. And the emails that I have sent, speaking from my own personal experience, does not even encourage people to vote for Red Hatters, because I do not think that is, in my opinion, that's not appropriate. It is more go read the bios, go make an informed election decision, but go vote. The most important thing is participate in the health of the community overall. And I think that's where Josh's suggestion is coming from, that perspective. Hey, we can provide SIG leads with some neutral language. And if one SIG lead is potentially running for steering and doesn't feel comfortable sending them out, because again, the years that I have sent that email out have been years that I am not running, because I do not, again, want to have even the perception of putting a finger on the scale or anything like that. But if we provided the tool to SIG leads of hey, if you want to send things out to your SIG, here is some very neutral language that we think will do the job of encouraging people to exercise their right to vote without necessarily putting that finger on the scale, endorsing a candidate, steering them in a particular direction, no pun intended. I think I actually quite like that as a benefit, because we've done that before as far as again, from the company perspective, if you're encouraging your engineering teams, here's a way to do it in a neutral way, as opposed to doing it in a way where you're recommending a slate of candidates, or you feel like you are pushing people to vote for the person who actually pushed send on the email.
Yeah, so I kind of disagree that non-steering members shouldn't electioneer, so to speak. And hear me out here. So definitely steering committee members should not electioneer. In fact, there's obviously a rule that you cannot. So that's clearly like something. But I actually am not against the practice of people in the Kubernetes project who are contributors and maintainers who are having discussions, sending emails, et cetera, about who they think that they would recommend. I actually think that is a more useful way to get more people to vote than anything else we have suggested. And I think there is a way to do this where maintainers who are very well respected, do a lot of work in the project, use their influence to get the people that they think who are going to be very qualified and worthwhile to get onto steering to be voted in. I actually don't disagree with the practice at all. What I think, and I think it hurts us as a community for us to think that because, and I'll use yourself, Christoph, as this example, because you had mentioned that because you don't believe that sending that email or like recommending who people should vote for is a good idea because you shouldn't do electioneering, that therefore everyone else practices the same, because they don't, for sure they don't. And so I think, if anything, unless we have a blanket rule against it, I actually don't think we should encourage or discourage the practice itself. Like I think even calling it electioneering is a bit of a strange term, because these are the people that are not up for election, right? Necessarily or usually, or even the people who are up for election. I'll use another example. No names mentioned this time, but people who want to get nominated for a CNCF award that gets presented at KubeCon, like the Chopwood Carry Water, etc., those are public nominations that go out. And I think a lot of us know in this virtual room here that people try and campaign to get nominated for these awards because they believe they've done enough really, really great work that should be recognized. And I, as a SIG lead, and I'll mention myself because I don't mind being on the recorded meeting, have absolutely nominated people for those awards because I think their work should be recognized, for example. And I've suggested to others in meetings, hey, if you think so, I've done this. If you want to do the same, go ahead. And I think using that influence in that way that positively is a good idea. So like what I'm saying is that I actually don't think electioneering in that way from non-steering members is bad. And I think that that's actually the way that we can encourage more people to vote.
I also think that I mean, we do the endorsement in the issue itself, right? So there we already do you can do some, hey, this candidate is good. And I don't see why this couldn't also be outside of the issue itself. Because apparently you have worked, I mean, most of the people here are endorsing people because they know how they work and what they have done in the past for the community.
Yeah, so I'll make this my last comment because I know I've spoken a bunch on this, and we still definitely have stuff to get to, or other people may want to chime in, but I agree with what you say, Natalie, from the perspective of if there isn't a rule against it, like if we do not have a policy one way or another, then maybe it's good not to discourage it. Like the point of the rule around like steering electioneering is more, we do not want somebody who is on steering already to use their more prominent voice to tip the scale towards the status quo, as it were. It does leave like when you think of like election campaigning in general in like other parts of our society and life, like people will say whatever they want whenever they want, and anybody can say whatever they want. I maybe I have a more I feel from my perspective like the healthiest the healthiest engagement in the community is if literally everybody reads every bio and they, based on their own values, chooses who they think is going to be the best representative for them on that committee. But I know that is not does their vote. Some people will do it again based on recommendations of other people who have respected opinions. Some people will do it of like, I work at company X. I'm going to vote for anybody else who works at company X because that's good for my company X. Without even maybe knowing who the person is, they just know who they're attached to, and it's very difficult. And we can't. There's no way. It's an impossibility for us to attach like value statements onto like the value of a vote, whether that vote is like somebody who's really like read everybody's bio and is making an intelligent decision, or somebody who's like, oh yeah, I know that person, they're my friend, or I know that person because they post a lot on social media, or I know that person because they work at my company. And there's no way for us to separate all that. So maybe
Yeah. So then on that thread, if we wouldn't mind to jump to my idea for next year, because it's sort of tangentially related, I want to suggest, because it happened in this election and I think it shouldn't happen again, that the requirement that we have for endorsement and nominations to actually get onto steering cannot all come from the same person's company then, as a way to possibly encourage more of what you just talked about, Christoph, as well.
So I could make one specific comment about that, because that was a very purposeful historical discussion. That doesn't mean we can't change it going forward, but just to add context about the historical decisions we were talking about. Like, these were early days when we were doing like bootstrap stuff. There's multiple places to put restrictions that you could possibly put restrictions on, like same employer, same company, same whatever, and being able to weight those pieces. The key place that we have put basically the safety valve of no one company, no one entity can have undue influence on the project is maximal representation. That you cannot have more than 30%. Like it basically works out to, you can't have more than 2 steering committee members on a committee of 7 from the same company at any one time. And you can run 17 candidates if you want, and they can all endorse each other, but at the end of the day, you can't elect more than 2 from the same company. So there is a safety valve there, and it was intentional to go like, okay, if we can put safety valves in 7 different places, or we could just put one safety valve that just makes sure that one company can't have undue influence, because it doesn't matter whether a company runs 1 candidate, 3 candidates, 17 candidates, they can still only have a maximal representation of 2 on the committee at one time.
So we understand how maximal representation works. The issue is that the endorsement requirement is that you must be endorsed by 3 different eligible voters from 3 different companies, but you can currently be nominated by somebody who works for your own company and then endorsed by somebody else who also works for your own company. And that gives you a somewhat unfair advantage over other candidates in your actual eligibility to run. That should not be allowed. We're not a small little bootstrappy project anymore. We're enormous, and I don't think we should be allowing both nomination and endorsement from the same company you work for.
Can I ask Kat what makes that unfair? Like, I see nominating and endorsing as 2 different things. Like, endorsing, you're still getting 3 endorsements, 3 separate companies. Why does the nomination? How does the nomination change? I don't fully understand what the
Sure
thought is.
So throwing away, say you self-nominate, whatever. So that's one involvement from massive cloud company, for instance, who would have a vested interest in having as many people as they can on the steering committee. Anybody can do that. Anybody can self-nominate. But I, for instance, working for a teeny startup with no other eligible voters at the company and more specifically, no eligible voters reporting to me, I don't have the ability to get that one extra, basically free step towards eligibility by having somebody else at my company also nominate me. If it was just one, like somebody else nominates me, that's fine. But when it's two, like somebody that, for instance, reports to you or works with you at your employer nominates you, and then somebody else, your employer, endorses you, that's a little bit sticky, and it's starting to look inappropriate, especially when those people do report directly to you. I just don't think it's a big ask to say that every step in this process has to come from a separate company. We already are most of the way there with requiring that the endorsements come from 3 different companies. So I don't see the barrier to saying that the nomination, whether it's a self nom or somebody else nominating you, has to come from a separate company from the endorsements.
So I believe I understand the point that you're trying to raise. I'm going to be very very direct and pragmatic about this. If you are running for steering in the current, looking at a current election, there was 210 votes cast.
Mm-hmm.
If you are wanting to run and be a successful candidate to steering, you need to get way more than 4 people to endorse your candidacy, right? You
I'm
need
aware.
way more than 4 people across the project in order to actually be successful at getting elected. The endorsement mechanism, and I have maybe an alternative suggestion here. So the endorsement mechanism is to ensure that a candidate is not coming in off the street with no involvement in the project and getting on the ballot. That's
Yes.
it. That is all it is. Once you hit that, hey, I have 3 people from the project at least 3 people who believe in me, great. You can get on the ballot. We, in previous years, the way we've handled endorsements and that kind of stuff is once we get 4, we used to do it all by email before we did the GitHub issues. We would literally shutter the email list thread and be like, no, nobody more reply. We do not want 17 endorsements of a particular candidate on the email list because that's spammy. Just go vote. But when you hit the limit, go. We could do that. We could do the same thing with the issues where we lock the thread once we've got the minimum number of nominations. Great. Endorsements. Once we've got the minimum number of endorsements, great. We lock the thread. We don't want any more endorsements on that thread because we've got the minimum that we need to show that somebody is not walking off the street with no connection to the project and getting on the ballot. The point in this, I don't pragmatically see that there is a very big difference in influence between somebody who gets nominated or self-nominated and then one of the 3 comes from their company versus all 3 come from different companies. That just feels like extra paperwork as opposed to something that's going to meaningfully influence or change the result of the election.
It's 2 things. One, allowing 2 people from the same company who report to you to give you publicity in the election via both the nomination and the endorsement is making it easier for somebody with not no connection to the project, but very little connection to the project to walk off the street and into a leadership position in a theoretical situation. But 2, it's an optics problem. It just looks sketchy, especially if you are aware that the people doing the nominating and the endorsement work directly for this person, this person signs their paycheck. It looks sketch.
I'm just going to jump in. Josh, is your comment on this, or is it about scheduling a follow-up?
It's this, although maybe we need to schedule a follow-up at this point. It's just we're not going to resolve this discussion in the context of a retro. It really sounds like we should have an election sub-project / steering meeting to discuss this, or a discussion thread about this, because it's not going to get resolved here. And in the meantime, we have, sort of other things we wanted to make sure to follow up on that are just technical details of the election.
Since we only have 2 more minutes, should we discuss when to organize the next, the follow-up for the retro?
Finding my mute button. Yeah, maybe I suggest next week at same time, and try and maybe I'd suggest try and keep it to 30 minutes to kind of churn through the last little bit of the ideas for next year, and then anything that ends up resulting in a bigger discussion like this, maybe we take out onto either a thread on GitHub or schedule something in the election sub-project.
Next week it'll certainly be quick because you'll get low attendance from the Americans. I know I can't make it.
I guess we can try the week after then. Like, couple of the points in ideas for next year are like similar. We need to start early. There's a common theme. Yeah, we can discuss offline when to schedule the follow-up call.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I would be up for 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now at this exact time is the steering committee meeting itself, but yeah,
okay.
maybe, yeah, we can try and find a time that works, but yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone for the very lively, engaged discussion. That like regardless of differences of opinion on things, I really appreciate everyone engaging so fervently on making sure that our community and our community's elections are healthy. Because the way we choose our leaders and having confidence in that process is one of those kind of like key pillars of community health, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thanks, Christoph. And if I need to follow up on anything that could have been a code of conduct violation, please let me know. I will happily figure it out.
We're all good from my perspective.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. I'll stop the recording now.